Why do companies fail to innovate? Think to the Toys R Us, but also to the Nokia, the Motorola, the BlackBerry. What happened to them? They've been dominating the world for decades thanks to their ability to innovate, and then all of a sudden they just fail. This has started happening more and more often ever since our society has started relying heavily on digital. And that's funny because digital evolution is a cyclical process and it's based on fixed principles and rules. So it should be fairly easy, at least for those of us who work in that domain, to understand the impact that a new technology will have on our companies and ultimately on our society. Typically, we say that the company that fails are the ones who lack the ability to innovate. Innovation, as Joseph Schumpeter used to say, is an act of creative disruption that requires to let go an existing paradigm, for as successful as it might have been in the past, to embrace a new one that is still to be proven successful. And this obviously generates resistances from the management. The problem, in other words, is not idea generation, but rather ideas selection. It's that ideas selection process that usually goes awfully wrong and leads the company to fall and disappear. This is not just philosophy. Let's consider the typical trajectories of a company who dominated the world for decades and then failed. I'm not talking about Nokia, I'm not talking about Motorola, and I'm not talking about BlackBerry. That would be too easy. We're gonna talk about Polaroid. Polaroid was founded by one of Steve Jobs' personal heroes, Edwin Land. He was an innovator. He invented, among other things, the polarized filter for light that we use in billions of products, from our smartphones, lenses, computers, smartwatches, and shades, and the instant camera. It was, if you want, the great-grandfather of selfie, and we might love him or hate him for that, but they changed our culture forever. So he founded the company in 1948. He brought the company from a short 7 million revenues in 1950 to an incredible 950 million revenues in 1976. And he dominated the world and an industry that he created for 28 years. But then something happened. Digital happened, and it was about the time to let go film as the epicenter of photography, to embrace a new business model, a digital one. In 1980, Len was approached by Akio Morita, Sony founder and chairman, to say, let's work together on a digital camera. Instead of opening up to this new possibility, Len and Polaroid acted in the way all the company that fails over the years, when it's about the time to approach a new cycle, did. It closed himself in and tried to justify its existing paradigm, the one that brought Polaroid to be so successful in the first place. He hired executives based on cultural fit, and he created the worst enemy of innovation, groupthink. And he said, no, people will always be willing to have their photo printed. And instead of going and working with Sony, he started reapplying the same paradigm on a slightly different domain. He tried to create an instant cameras for movies, which sounds incredibly counterintuitive also right now. The product was a bust. It burned 600 millions, and he was removed in 1982 as a CEO of a company that he created by his board. But even after he was gone, groupthink remained, so Polaroid was incapable of innovating. And in 1985, Mac Booten, new CEO, said, film will always be the epicenter of photography, and we know better because we invented this thing, despite every data that was showing different. And when in 1987, a young Carl Jankowski, if you don't know who he is, he would have been the later inventor of Sony PlayStation, desperately tried to finally transition Polaroid into its digital phase. Mac Booten said, I don't know if I should fire you or punch you in the nose, and I'm quoting, it's not really hard to find point of contacts with this story, the Nokia story, the Motorola story, and the Toys R Us story, and the you name it story. Possibly your company might be on that trajectory too. So what company need to do in order to avoid to fall into this path to self-destruction? Sure, calling consulting and shrink to your executive might help, but it's not the definitive answer. What company need to do is to shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, from a state in which things has always been like this and are always going to be like this, to a state in which everything, even the deepest foundation or belief, could be changed and improved. And instead of hiring based on cultural fit, my dear HR executive, please start hiring based on cultural contribution. Because if repetition might make a perfect process, it will never make new. While cultural contribution will bring criticism, new perspective and point of view, questioning the status quo to embrace a new paradigm, and a scenario in which the company, instead of failing, will prosper on a different business model. Thanks everyone, ciao, and rock on.